I first got the news about being cast on FarScape when I was up on the Gold Coast filming Pitch Black. And it was an interesting history for me in particular because the show had come in the form of a pilot script to some of the casting agencies, or sorry, to some of the theatrical agencies through a casting agent. And we knew it was a Jim Henson production. Some of the characters sounded extraordinary in terms of what they were aiming to do with the makeups and the costumes and the special effects. And the role of Aeryn was being cast out of England or America. And because it was a co-production, there was a certain quota that they had to fill in terms of casting people from different territories. And the casting agents had said to me that they thought I'd be great for the role of Aeryn, but unfortunately it was being cast elsewhere. And they asked me, nevertheless, because they just had a feeling, would I, just in case, put down an audition tape for them? And then I thought nothing more of it. And I'd actually been asked to help some of the other actors. I would read opposite them in their auditions, so people auditioning for Zan and Dargo and whatever. I read opposite the male characters. And I just got a call out of the blue while I was doing Pitch Black, and they said, would I fly down over the weekend and do a screen test? And it was with Ben Browder, so that's when I first met him. And there was technically instant chemistry because we just sort of fell into a very easy rhythm with one another. And that was the major point for me, was being able to go back to the set and people asked how the audition had gone, and I said, well, I can definitely work with this guy. And it never really changed, it just got better for me. There was an overlap between finishing Pitch Black and starting FarScape, and there were some complications, and the producers had to liaise, and I almost didn't get the job on FarScape. I'd completely forgotten about that actually, but Brian Henson said to me afterwards, you know, we fought very hard and it almost didn't happen. I didn't realize how serious it had gotten, and I at one point had to actually ring David Kemper. He'd left me his number, and I had to ring him and say, I've heard that this may not happen, and I'm about to get the news that you've had to pass and go to someone else. And he said, no, you'll get it. We're just kind of making it happen, so just sit tight and we'll make it work. So I was very lucky, though. More often than not, in those circumstances, when people are paying a lot of money to wait, they won't. A normal day on the set of FarScape, if there is such a thing on FarScape. Well, Ben and I, whoever was a human face on the show would be most likely to be on set first, in the first scenes of the day and the last scenes of the day, because they had to observe a turnaround for everyone. So the actors who were in heavy makeup, like Gigi Edgley, Virginia Hay, Anthony Simcoe, as regular cast members, they would have to come in still very early, but they wouldn't be on set until much later. So getting up as late as possible, but still to be on time for my pickup. Each season, I think, the first season we started filming it at Fox Studios, which was a total luxury because most people working on the show lived within 5 minutes of it, walking or driving. It was very central and fantastic purpose-built studios. Then we moved out to these sheds in Homebush, no air conditioning, roofs that creaked, and when it rained, unbelievable noise. When the sun was out, unbelievable noise from the creaking. Planes overhead. It was an incredible environment to work in, which then meant revoicing a lot of the work, about 98% by the end, I think, by the end of fourth season. So for us, normally Ben and I would come in, maybe shoot for however many hours until lunch. It was all about lunch for me. I just would count the hours. It was like being back at school. Have an enormous lunch to refuel, and then, unless we were doing stunt scenes, if we were doing a fight sequence at the end of the day, I'd try not to eat too much because you get quite ill. And then lunchtime, if we were lucky, we had it to ourselves, and if we had to, we'd do interviews. And most days, by about season 2, if I wasn't horizontal for about 5 minutes during the lunch, I just did not think I would make it through. I don't know how Ben did it. He had more resilience and more staying power than anyone. And I realized partway through, I actually turned to him and I said, I've realized what you do now. And he said, what? And I said, you mentally prepare to do this show for 50 years, so that if we only do it for 5, you've got plenty of energy left in reserve. And he said, yeah, that's basically how I operate. So a normal day for most of us was to be tired and barely be coping, and for Ben was, smooth sailing, basically. I always read articles about pranks happening on sets where Mel Gibson's shooting something, and that it's part of the Aussie larrikin sensibility. We didn't have many pranks per se. It was mostly a lot of mucking about. Something would happen when you're working with a lot of technical elements that you're trying to integrate, especially with the puppets. A lot of things would happen because it took so many people to just make one puppet creature, one Jim Henson creature come alive. And the puppeteers are so funny. So a lot of the time the comedy would come from John Eccleston, who puppeteered Rigel in the first season. The cameras would stop rolling, but he wouldn't. He'd keep going. Anthony Simcoe, there's a lot of bloopers that I don't think the world will ever see because they're mostly of Anthony and they're obscene. And for the rest of us, I don't know. I mean, it was definitely a fun environment to work in, and people were always mucking around until the last second, you know, until action was called, and then we'd all get very serious and slide into our characters immediately, or one would hope we would. And they were always bordering on the serious, a lot of the things that would happen on set, because we were dealing with pyrotechnics or props that were potentially dangerous or actors in really heavy, hot suits. But I don't think any of us set out specifically to create pranks to play on other people. One of the strangest things that I experienced on one of my first days on FarScape was being led by the hand into the creature shop to meet Pilot and to meet Rigel. And I think Rigel, I can't remember if his skin was on, but the skin is the latex exterior that gets placed over him, and they're changed depending on what we actually, you know, we inflict upon them. And the artists sort of repaint the exterior. By season 2 or 3, they were getting so frequently slimed or, you know, dealing with food or whatever that they were being changed with regularity. And the work behind making those puppets come to life astounded me, from pre-production through to being on set. And on set, it was a work in progress. They spend a lot of money on R&D as they're going. At the Jim Henson Company, they're constantly trying to refine the technology. So the animatronics in Rigel cost millions of dollars, I think, over several years of working on other projects to finally create Rigel as a character. 4 to 5 people on the floor would help bring in John Eccleston, his arm would be in the puppet, inside Rigel, and he would articulate the body and head. And there'd be people just sort of physically moving him in. They would have these special glasses that had cameras inside them so that they could see on the monitor, basically see what the directors were seeing so that they could position the puppet into the right place. We would seldom do shots where Rigel was flying in, where you could see below the sled. Very expensive shot to do and time-consuming for the computer generators, for the CGI group. And then there would be someone separately doing Rigel's eyes. His mouth was animatronic, and his ears. And then the puppeteer would do his voice on set, only to be revoiced by Jonathan Hardy afterwards. So there was a weird adjustment period, getting used to the fact that there was a different character on set than there was after it had been revoiced. Rigel was quite ebullient on set and cheeky, and then by the time Jonathan Hardy's very gruff voice came in, he was a lot older and wiser. So that took a while to adjust. And then there were also the green screen elements, that component, screaming at a monster that isn't really there. Sometimes there wasn't much information the directors could give us at any given time. And what that does for an actor, I mean, the lesson I really learned was to sort of distill everything and to simplify it down so that the responses I'm giving they're generic enough that they could be applied to whatever gets placed in afterwards, but also having to conjure something that is real from the inside so that you're not hamming it too much. One of the weirdest things was first being introduced to Pilot, and someone took me into the shed and said, "Look at him, isn't he gorgeous?" And I didn't know what to think. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it before. And it wasn't until he was really came alive that I could see him as something, you know, or living. And there was a whole person inside. They would place themselves, their whole body inside Rigel's Pilot's shell, There was a person on each of his forearms. There would be someone doing his eyes, his eyebrows, his mouth. And that particular puppeteering, that set was so difficult and arduous for the puppeteers. It was really hot. It was totally cramped. It would therefore be even more difficult to bring more than one actor in at a time, if that. I instantly was drawn to the expressiveness of Pilot's eyes, and that made it instantly easy for me to do scenes with him. Sometimes you'll do scenes with actors and it's sort of glazed over and the lights are on and nobody's home. With Pilot, that was never the case, and certainly not with the actors on FarScape, but just the experience of working with a creature that was real enough for me to emote with. It says a lot about the work that was done on him by the puppeteers and by the people who created the animatronics, and painted him. Um, and it's something that directors will often put on their show reels. There'll be scenes where I'm sort of emoting, I'll be crying with Pilot, and it seems to be valuable for people to see that a director was able to direct an actor to a level of emotion with something that isn't human. I found it easy, actually. In the final scene that I shot with Pilot in season 4, it looked like we were about to do a love scene. We'd got so close. And one thing that we learnt very early on was the more physical contact you have with these objects, the less inanimate they are, the more lifelike they become. So we would always aim to have as much physical contact with them as possible. The difficult episodes to film were the ones where we hadn't received the script before we started shooting. When you're a lead actor or part of a core cast, you have a huge responsibility to carry the story, to work out what color you bring to that canvas and deliver that wholeheartedly. And when you don't know what direction it's going in, where it leads, you can't really fulfill your responsibilities. So sadly, creatively, you have to tone down your choices because you have to make them more generic so that they can be slotted into whatever is filled in around it, around those scenes. And some days, Ben and I, Meltdown was a particularly difficult episode to shoot because we had not received the script. And the director was in a near to impossible position where he had to make something out of nothing. We had a basic idea of what was going to happen in the story, but there's always so many indications from the writer as to how you tell the story. And there may only be, I mean, what's the story? There's only 13 original stories told a million different ways. One of the great things about FarScape was bringing a very irreverent tone to an otherwise common story, or putting a unique, twist on the tale. And we weren't in a position to do that as performers if we didn't have the story in front of us. Hard to do a painting without the canvas. So, contrasting that, there were episodes like Ben Browder's one where I played the crazy blonde-haired princess. The wig was very heavy and I started to get a bit cranky boomsticks, as I call it. I was a bit tired and wanted to have a lunch. Great opportunity for improvisation. I found that Aeryn was too clean and serious a character to improvise in the way that, say, Crichton would in his environment, and therefore I, as an actor, didn't feel I could really let loose on Aeryn terribly much. But the more she started to soften with Crichton, especially the Talon Crichton, there was a lot more room for improvisation in that regard, and so there are scenes that are quite intimate between Crichton and Aeryn where she's learning to speak English. That was one of my ideas that I'd threaded through from something from David Kemper, and one of the other writers, and so we would feed in those things when we could. But as far as episodes go on a whole, the two-parter where the Talon Crichton dies, the sand dune sequences was such fun to film in those buggies, fanging around, as I say, which is as I'll say, the technical term for driving at high speed in a sand buggy. Shooting on location in Australia when the weather is perfect is just a sublime experience, and we look back on that with great fondness. Episodes on the whole, the choice was a really stimulating episode for me. I was nervous as hell because I knew I was carrying it individually, really. And getting an opportunity to work, that was the start of more work with Paul Goddard as well. And he was so lovely to work with. And Rowan, I mean, we just all enjoyed working with our stable of directors who would return, our recurring directors. It was just another opportunity for us to come up with some ideas and play around with the story. And yeah, I enjoyed the choice immensely, actually. And my mother got to return, and Linda Cropper's a fabulous woman. Great actress, really well known in Australia, but also really funny. So in between all the very serious stuff where we were sort of having fights, we'd sort of crack up, directly afterwards.
That's really strange to think of.
I know.
Such a serious.
So stern, and they had such a terrible relationship, and it was so dysfunctional. There was one particular day where I was shooting a scene in the Choice with my mother, and we're standing on the balcony. It's when Grace comes in and shoots her accidentally on purpose. And I was supposed to catch Linda Cropper and sort of hold her before she dies and have this moment with her where she says, basically, let me go. And Aeryn finally decides that she should sort of release her mother off a building so that she can splat on the floor below. And there were all these safety mats, and I went to catch Linda, and she fell at a slightly different angle than what I was expecting, and I'm totally uncoordinated anyway, so I don't know why any actor would ever trust me. And I missed, and she fell over, and we both fell off the wall together. And I swore, and it was quite funny, and I think they removed the swearing from the bloopers, but poor mum, couldn't catch her. Unfortunately, I am responsible for that voice from the princess character. It was sort of elements of Tennessee Williams, Vivian Lee, um, but combined with Mike Tyson trapped in a woman's body. That was really the reference for it. And I was inspired by Miranda Richardson's Queen from Blackadder series. There's something very sinister about a woman who is predatory but has an absurd voice working as a disservice to her. Sort of, I don't know, those two things in tandem I thought were a very interesting concept. And I mentioned it to Ben, and he loved the idea. And I just loved the fact that it would make Ben laugh. And as irritating as it was when I was trying to do serious work with that accent, he'd be killing himself on the other side of camera. It was just a joy and such a privilege to be in a position where I could play a character that was so different to Aeryn, and, and stimulating for me to create something from scratch again. It was fantastic. Our show ran very differently to most, which is in some ways an enormous privilege, but it's also places actors in a position that they may not want to be in. It was a highly collaborative environment, which is wonderful. But if the script hasn't been delivered or it's going through a series of amendments, um, it puts a lot of pressure on the actors. And it's great for the writers because they say, you don't want to write the lines now. It's a lot harder than it appears, and structurally to have an understanding of a story. And an episode has to be written specifically to certain timings for the ad breaks and for different countries. It's a complex process, and what can and can't be shot within a short time frame on fast turnaround television is also very complex. So we were sort of like the tip of the iceberg when it came to contributions where stories were concerned. But it's also a vital part in the sense that it's what's done on set, therefore it's the final product. If something wasn't working on set and the director suggested that we come up with something, then there would be a lot of input in that case. Um, if we had a suggestion that deviated from the script, we would either take it up with the writers beforehand. They grew to a point where they trusted us so much that we could either do the option that they'd done on the page and then do our own, or if they trusted us or had offered, actually asked us specifically to do something that was more suited to us, they would insert something in the script as a benchmark and then expect us to do something that was more flavored to our characters, as specific character traits. So, I mean, it was more in Ben's domain to improvise because he was the voice of America. He was the human and the voice for all the humans watching the show. So he was the one that could bring in the cultural references that the audience would understand and the aliens wouldn't. Did get to a point though by the end of first season where we realized there was only so many times we could play that gag of the aliens not getting it. So we had our opportunities to go to Earth or simulated versions of Earth so that the aliens could start to sort of catch up to speed. And that is actually, coincidentally or not, the time where we started to collaborate more as actors on set with the words. I always say, and I think Ben agrees with me, that the best stories are the romantic ones on a large scale. I mean, and if if two characters are meant to be together, then nothing will keep them apart. So it doesn't really matter where or how season four leaves the two characters. In our minds, they were always meant for each other from the moment they met. And I think that's what we've asked the audience to invest in from the very beginning. Um, and it was very difficult for the writers to constantly come up with ways to pull them apart and then bring them together again, round and round, find new ways to do it so we weren't underestimating the audience's intelligence. Um, and the coin toss scene is indicative of that. We were trying to find a way through that part of the story in that episode and how we could possibly separate those two characters. And I suggested the coin toss to David. I said it's not a perfect solution, but it goes along the lines of that huge romantic arc where the characters are placing their love and their destinies in the hands of fate. And I basically said to Ben and to David and Andrew Prowse, the director, if they really are meant to be together, then the coin toss isn't really going to. It's a temporary solution, and it really isn't going to make a difference in the end. And I think Ben and I are total romantics, total softies at heart, and we were always trying to find opportunities in every episode, in every scene. Sometimes there weren't scenes, or we'd go episodes where we'd hardly spend any time together on set at all because it was getting harder and harder to keep us in a room and not justify them being together. Um, but we would always be looking for the opportunities on camera to show how much they were drawn to one another because it's desperately romantic. Americans love hair, I think more so than any other country. So if you can have your hair out, I think that's a big plus, and it seems to go with this genre as well to have sort of the wind blowing and the sparks flying and the hair going. Um, so we would try and give everyone a mix of everything so that there was a look that everyone would like, audience, producers, network, everyone. The practical issue of how my hair would be for each episode began to override all other issues because we were starting to overlap a lot of our shooting schedules. Became impossible for them to allow time to go from one style to another. So it pretty much flattened out for a lot of season two and season three, where I had the very slicked, tight pony. The battle pony was the first one that we designed. We were very proud of that. That was sort of like that weird um, rockabilly front with the loose pony at the end. The slicked look was originally what I'd wanted for the character. I wanted her to be quite severe, and I think everyone was a bit nervous about having a leading lady on television with such a harsh look. But it just, to me, epitomized the true character of Aeryn. Um, and then in fourth season, David Kemper had said he wanted Aeryn to look like she'd really been through hell. I wanted a quite punkish, run Lola run style haircut that looked like she'd gone through some changes. We wanted to sort of work on some sort of idea along those lines, but it was a bit hard to convince people to go punk. Um, and we ended up creating it sort of like a three-quarter wig, which provided us with the opportunity to not bring me in unnecessarily early to straighten my hair, which is very curly and frizzy. It became a very girly issue, actually, of time and money. And if we'd done to my hair every day what the wig could do for me, it would have fallen out, I think, after about 4 weeks of doing it. And getting closer and closer to the special effects, it was somebody else's hair in the hairpiece rather than mine, so it was safer, and it told the story of Aaron having been away for a long time. That was, I never expected it to be as long as it was, and we had to go through a lot of different changes trying to make it work and integrating it. Um, but I quite liked it. It was the most girly that Aaron looked really in season four. Um, Different makeup artists. There's a high burnout rate actually because people work such long hours. And I would often say to the makeup artists every year, because we developed these very strong relationships with them and fantastic shorthand, so we'd never have to say anything. We knew exactly what we needed to do every day on set together. Um, I would say to them, technically, there's not much more you can learn doing my makeup. Go off, do other shows, take other jobs, please, otherwise burn out. So I would always encourage them to go off and do it, even though I knew it would disadvantage me because I'd be losing a great makeup artist. But every year we'd still get another person in who was fantastic. But the looks would always change because it was someone else's input. And I'm of the opinion that I shouldn't dictate how I should look, even though there is a certain continuity. I always like people to establish the look themselves and do what they, try something with my face as a canvas and give them an opportunity to be creative. Because FarScape essentially was a very creative environment, so we wanted everyone to collaborate and feel that they were involved. I was asked recently, actually, when I first started acting, and I'd forgotten that my first amateur role was in kindergarten as the lead in the school play. That pretty much gave me the taste for it, and I don't mean to compare myself specifically with the likes of Mozart or Beethoven, but I really don't think they woke up one day and said, gotta decide, do I want to make cakes for a living or be a composer? You're just born with a hunger for certain things and an attraction to the performing arts if you are a performer. And I came from a very musical background, and we were always taken out to a lot of theatre from a very young age. And my grandmother was a drama, language, and music teacher, and she was always always encouraged us and helped me with my French and with the music. And I suppose people expected that I would be a singer, that I'd do opera singing and go and get the training. And at that point, at that age, in my late teens, even though I'm actually very sort of serious and responsible, I felt that it was too much of a commitment to a particular type of lifestyle. That I was very sensitive to smoky atmospheres and things like that, and I'd always heard these stories about Dame Joan Sutherland and how, out of respect, when she would come out after a show and go to parties afterwards, people would always extinguish their cigarettes. You can't expect the world to stop doing what they're doing, and I would get so stressed out about performing that something would happen to my voice. I'd get a cold from stress or whatever. So it was like this sort of weird self-sabotage that would happen. So I wanted to just give myself a bit of a break. And the acting to me was more of a challenge because I expected less of myself. Um, but I wanted to work very hard at it, and there seemed to be more to learn because I had this innate sense with the music at a young age. And I was lucky. I was fortunate that I was able to learn. I had no training. I was able to learn on the job. I apologize to audiences who saw my earlier work, but hey, move on. We learn. If Aeryn and Buffy went head to head, well, there's sort of that question has a second part to it. Aeryn does have a pistol, so that is, you know, take it as a given. I think Aeryn would be very well matched with Buffy. I'd like to say that she'd win. I know for sure that if Claudia had to fight, hands down, she would lose. Hands down.
But Claudia versus Sarah Michelle Gellar, that might be a different one.
Claudia versus Sarah Michelle Gellar. Seriously, she's a black belt in karate. I have no chance. I used to play in the recorder consort at school while she was training to be a warrior. I've got no chance in hell. I was utterly shocked when I heard that FarScape wasn't going for season 5. There'd been talk about doing 13 episodes instead of 22. Um, we would have been very lucky indeed to do the 13 because it would have been an opportunity for us to finish it on our terms and really feel that we could give it one last burst of energy and creativity. Um, season 4 was a difficult one, and we all felt that we were owed another chance. So, but all things end, and I think it was better to end it with people screaming for more. I try not to get attached to things, so the money, all of those things, just having a regular income as an actor. In Australia, you're never paid terribly well. It's better than not working as an actor, but in America, there's a residual system, so we do have to now go out and search for more work because it's not the wage that keeps on giving as it is in the States. So um, I can't believe that I won't see more of Aeryn and Crichton together on screen. That's really hit home for me. The fact that something about them has to crystallize and visually end where we leave it at the end of season 4. Um, but I am, as I've said before, a desperate romantic, and I really believe that what we created is substantial enough between the two of them that the audience will rest assured that there's a happy ending. I'll miss so many things about not doing Farscape, and we'd been talking about it when we were waiting to hear whether we'd get season 5. We were all starting to become very sentimental and reminiscent, and reminisce a lot. And the people, first and foremost. It becomes a family, and unlike other circuses, this one won't move on as an ensemble. We'll all sort of scatter. And being a co-production, people will go across the world, and Australia's a very long way to travel to anywhere, from anywhere. Um, what else? It was the most incredible character to play. Aeryn was just phenomenal. Um, may sound like bias, but I think she was definitely one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting character, because she had the greatest development to take place, and it was through a man and through love that it was going to happen. So it just ticked a lot of my boxes as a performer because it was a romantic arc. It was stimulating because, I mean, part of it, a lot of it at the beginning was controlled by the producers and how much they wanted to reveal of her character developing at any given time. But then the story started to take over and the characters started to take over in their own way. I will miss, perhaps more than anything, working with Ben Browder. He was the most incredible leading man. He was a phenomenal working friend. Um, and we just had such a great chemistry together working. We just understood each other, didn't really need to discuss anything. We rarely talked about a scene. We just understood it and would go in and do it. And having that kind of rapport with an actor and it getting better and better, we never had a single fight. I think we had one tense moment at one point in season 1 very early on when I was a bit grouchy and he was very gentlemanly about it. Um, so how can I possibly expect to find other colleagues to work with like that, other leading men? Um, Second to none. So privileged to have had the opportunity to play both the character and to play side by side with Ben. And all the crew, I mean, they become, they're the faces that you see every morning and last at night before you go home, and I spend more time with those people than I do with my friends and family, so they're forever a part of you and who you become as an actor. So I hope I see them again. And the fans I know will always be there, so I can't miss them because they're not going to go, I don't think. I went away on the weekend after I'd heard the news about the show being axed, and I went through quite a quandary about whether I should stay in town or not. And everyone said, look, the show doesn't finish filming until Wednesday, so go away for the weekend, come back and come to set on the last night. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday, and we'll have a proper sort of whatever it was. We couldn't even call it a celebration. Um, and I was absolutely gobsmacked when I heard that we'd made it onto CNN. Could not believe it. 2 or 3 nights, 2 consecutive nights, I think, in 1 week, and then the following week. So the power of the group astonished me, and I've always been delighted by the FarScape fans when I've met them, but knowing that they were true to their word and would do whatever they could, and just knowing that it was a project that they cared so much about that they were willing to fight for it was touching, to say the least. And sadly now, I don't know if there's much that we can do to save Farscape. The sets have all been pulled down. Everyone's sort of scattered to the four winds. And if there is a movie, we always joke and say that it'll probably be with Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts. But just to get the money for it. And Brian says there's no way that that's possible, that it can't be made without us. But I think what we achieved is phenomenal. And I think something like 5% of all TV shows around the world make it to a fourth season. So we should all be really proud of that. The fans accomplished so much to begin with just by supporting the show the way they did. Sci-Fi Channel took such a huge gamble making Farscape in the first place. We were lucky that it ever happened. Brian had been shopping around for 5 years to get someone to buy the concept, so to me, it was a blessing to have that marriage with Sci-Fi Channel, and I hope the ratings for the final episodes of season 4 knock their socks off, everybody's socks off, and we've enjoyed incredible success here in Britain, which excites us a lot. I don't know if everyone's aware here how much we enjoy hearing that it's doing well here. It means a great deal. Um, just knowing that it's being seen, that it's being appreciated beyond the States. And yeah, I've been amazed by the support we've had from everyone. All things end in one way or another, and I'm just hoping that all the fans will stick with us and that we'll choose projects that they'll continue enjoying. Very sad. Um, I haven't had time to take any other work. There's just once this sort of convention is over, I'm pretty much a free agent, and I'm sure that's when it all hit home that I'm truly unemployed. One of the difficulties of not knowing for so long whether we were doing a fifth season or not was that we weren't really allowed to go out shopping for work because we couldn't be counted on to turn up for work if FarScape kept going. So there may be, a large gap. I don't know how long it will be, and that may be enforced by the fact that I'm having to really take care over what projects I choose, or it may just be that, you know, nothing comes up. And as we say in the trade, I'm resting. And people have told me when I was coming through the ranks that a mark of a great actor is one who deals with the period of unemployment as well as they deal with the period of employment. Hmm. Well, I'll have to work on that. I do need a break. We really worked so hard on FarScape that I will enjoy having a break. But I feel that I'm at my best as a person, and I feel that I'm coming home when I walk onto a set or onto a stage. So if I can perform in one way or another, I think I'll be okay.
Great, thanks very much. Lovely interview.
Thank you very much.